Eater. Oh, I'm sorry, Mark. Oh, gosh.
So we're gonna give
Come
the
over
next
here.
one a full hour. You wanna speak? Or you gonna? No, that's
It does
just
not have to
maximum
go,
time.
and we don't have to cut it off at an hour, but we have to be mindful that we have another candidate
Right.
scheduled after that.
Yeah.
Okay, are we
Oh,
ready?
for the record, how long did we go the last interview? Like an hour and what? Hour and 5?
We actually started at 5 after, and I think it went about an hour 5.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
Thank you. Ready for the next candidate?
Yes.
Okay.
Jeffrey Eater. Oh, Peoria. Oh, he's tall.
Mayor and Commissioners, Mr. Jeffrey Eater.
Good morning, Mr. Eater. How are you?
Good, good. Beautiful morning.
Yeah, welcome to Dania Beach.
Thank you.
I hope you had a safe flight and good travels, and
I did.
we welcome you here.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. So we've had an opportunity to review your resume. Please take just a few minutes to explain your perspective from your perspective, how your background prepares you for this position.
Well, I think there's a lot of things that I've done that helped prepare me for this position. As you've read, I've moved around a little bit in my career, and I won't go through everything on my resume, but I come up from urban planning degree into my MBA, worked on everything from a base closure to worked in Champaign-Urbana as an economic development person, then got into city government up in the Chicago region at the village of Franklin Park. It's an inner ring suburb, just touches the south side of O'Hare, gives you an idea where that's at. So I've dealt with a lot of O'Hare type issues, major metro area type issues, led the economic development efforts there, also led major infrastructure projects with the city there. We did a grade separation, a rail car grade separation there of about a $45 million project where the city had been wanting to do this grade separation since about 1915 or so, and we completed it in '06, I believe, is when we completed that project. So that took a lot of work. That position there prepared me to go on to the city of Rock Island, where I was initially hired as the community development director, planning, zoning, economic development, code enforcement, etc. I was there less than 6 months before being named the assistant city manager there. Community of a little over 40,000 people in a metro area of about 300,000 in Illinois. So, and again, a pretty good community. And then I made, about 2 years ago, I made the leap to a city manager position in the city of East Peoria. A little smaller community, and that's typical how you used to get your start in the city management. You go into a community, you start smaller, and then you work up into larger, more complex community. In East Peoria, I run, or departments that report to me, police, fire, community development, code enforcement, finance, HR. We do have a tourism and a parks-like department that does some events. We have our own event center that we run. So it's a unique community where, again, an older community like Dania Beach, where they've done a lot of redevelopment in the last 15, 20 years. They took, they called it the Levee District. It's on the Illinois River. A number of old Caterpillar plants were demolished in the 80s by Caterpillar. The city worked with Caterpillar, acquired the site, and then worked to bring in a developer, brought in a number of commercial retailers. Costco targeted the two main anchors in that development. Bass Pro was on another site. done at this around the same time. But there's a lot of entertainment, dining entertainment that was developed with that project. And that's really the engine that drives the city. And we're still continuing to try to build on those efforts.
Okay. My follow-up question is to tell you that obviously the city of Dania Beach is a coastal community, and we are experiencing significant growth. So how has your previous experience prepared you to handle a transitioning environment?
Well, a number of the communities I've been in have been in transition. Franklin Park was probably the one that was growing the most in the Chicago region. We completely built out, so it was all redevelopments. Up until the housing crisis in '08, we were tearing down. We had a lot of old infrastructure, old industrial buildings, old downtown that was just falling down right next to our metro station. So we had a concerted effort to redevelop the downtown into some core commercial space on the ground floor with condos above. That was very successful. We got a couple hundred units built of that before the housing crisis. We also were doing a significant amount of industrial redevelopment, primarily driven because of O'Hare and the logistics markets around O'Hare. So that has taught me a lot on development. Rock Island and East Peoria, a little slower pace on development, but still there was things going on in the communities. Where in Rock Island, I led a process of redeveloping an old shopping center. Unfortunately, I left before it actually got completed. It got all assembled while I was there, and that included moving a baking company that was in an old department store that needed to grow, and their New York corporate headquarters was going to move them out of town. The city worked with them and a local developer and built them a $12 million facility. Instead of them leaving, we brought more jobs to the community. Some of the coastal stuff you're dealing with, Rock Island's on the Mississippi River. I know it's not the coastal issues, but I'm very familiar with the Army Corps of Engineers, the process we do, because we had to do levee maintenance continually along the Mississippi, much like your beach and your systems here. So I am very familiar with some of the challenges you face here in that regards, not necessarily the hurricane-type coastal issues you face, but I'm sure I can learn those issues, and you've got a great staff to help guide me through that.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions? Commissioner Savino.
Just one. When you became the city administrator at East Peoria, how many people are in that community?
East Peoria has 22,000 people in the community.
Okay, and there's no room for growth in that, as you said?
Actually, there is room for growth. We have growth room. We're growing slowly.
Okay.
From population. I think last year we built 40 new homes, for example.
Okay.
So we are growing, but it's a much slower pace than what you're seeing here.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor.
One of the key words that stuck out, and I'm going to ask a question, in dealing with O'Hare,
Yes.
because here, FLL is kind of, in some ways, the enemy. How do you suggest dealing with BCAD, Broward County Aviation Department, and using the economic engine that it is to better benefit our city rather than looking at it as an adversary, and it's a bad thing rather than being a good thing?
Yes. It often can be. O'Hare was a lot of times the bad thing in my market, and it was a lot of it was due to the noise issues. Fortunately for my community, Franklin Park there, the alignment changes at O'Hare actually benefited to the residential population there. They took out the one runway that shot over the residential in my house, which was nice, as they aligned the 6 parallel runways. However, we did work very, very closely with the city of Chicago on that O'Hare expansion, and you've got to use all your tools. An airport like that is a great economic engine, and you have to look at it from an economic engine and what kind of industries will follow the airports. Here, not only do you have that, you have the port, which means a lot of visitors through your community and hotels, But then you've got the airport, which is people, but air cargo is huge in a lot of airports. It's one thing that I didn't realize how much cargo comes through O'Hare until I got to Franklin Park. There's an extraordinary amount of high-value goods that are transported via plane all over the world, and they come through communities. O'Hare, I'm sure they're coming through FLL as well. And you've got to just take advantage of those opportunities and that international airport. And I think you can do that from a logistics standpoint, and then you can do that as your tech sector grows. One of the things the tech sector needs is to be able to get out to their customers, and you have an airport that allows you to do that. And you have the amenities of the community, being a beach community, being a sunshine state, that's going to be attractive to the younger workers.
Was that your number 2 question? Did you ask that question?
No, that's it for that.
Okay. Commissioner Brandon Martin?
Your area there is well known for Caterpillar, correct?
Correct.
When Caterpillar was having their biggest problems, did it affect your population?
Our population stayed flat
It stayed flat?
when they had their biggest problems,
Right.
yes. And the population is actually, like I said, growing slightly.
Slightly?
Mhm.
What slightly?
Well, we're slow growth. One of the things that we're building, we built like 40 houses last year.
Okay, thank you.
So new community,
Yeah,
people
thank
coming into
you.
the community.
Commissioner Brandon Martin, it's your turn for a question.
How many have we asked so far off the sheet?
1.
Okay. Just
What'd
the
you
top,
say?
just number 1?
I've asked number 1.
Oh,
But,
you've asked number 1. Okay, so number 2 is not supposed to be me anyway.
it doesn't matter. Just choose
it's
any
a-
question you want.
Oh, okay, thanks. How would you establish credibility and build trust with the elected officials, residents, and staff if you came to this city, considering you're coming all the way from Peoria?
Well, that's something you have to do in any move, whether it's a long-distance move such as I have, or if it's a much shorter move. You have to establish that credibility with the elected officials and the community. One of the things that I would do is first, I'd want to sit down individually with each of you to get to know you a little personal, know a little bit about you, and that way you can know more insights about me as well, find out how you work, how you like to communicate. Everybody's got a preferred method of communication. There are some methods that if I'm communicating out to the whole board, you really need to communicate the same message out. So sometimes it's easier via memo or an email to communicate a consistent message. But I know my current commissioners that I work with and past elected officials, a lot of times having a direct dialogue with them, talk them through the issues that are facing the community, and for them to have somebody to bounce ideas off, and for myself to bounce ideas off. But as far as getting out in the community, I'm a longtime Rotarian, so I'd probably look for something like a Rotary Club to get involved in. I've spoken at Kiwanis clubs, I've spoken at other service clubs, I've spoken to church groups, just trying to get out into the community to know what's going on. If there's community events, I've in the past taken advantage of those to have people get to know me. And that's when I went, when I went to Rock Island, I did a lot of that because they had a lot of very organized neighborhood associations in Rock Island. My current community is not so much organized like that, but I am and still like to get out to community organizations and let them know what's going on in the community and get to know people and know what they want from their city leaders.
Thank you.
Do we have any follow-up on that? Commissioner, wait, I do, sorry. Tell me about a time where you inherited a process or a team that was not working, and how did you handle it?
I don't know if I inherited one that was completely broke. I had walked into a couple difficult situations, both my current position in East Peoria wasn't broke, but I inherited a buyout program where the city had offered an early buyout for a number of employees. non-police and fire, so they were public works, code enforcement folks, city people like that. We ended up having 22 people take that buyout. 18 of them were in public works within my first 6 months of working there. Huge challenge to try to replace that much talent in the community. And then in public works, a year after that, my public works director became eligible to retire. He wasn't eligible for the early buyout, and he left after we reorganized the public works department. So I sat down with mainly public works and figured out how we were going to reorganize and how we were going about recruiting new talent into the community. And it's not easy to find water operators, wastewater operators, and the licensures that they need to have to operate those sections of public works. So it was challenging. We put a plan together. We worked with our HR person and staff members to recruit individuals to come into the community.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Speaking of your staff and the recruiting new staff, well, how do you motivate and develop them, and what ways have you found to promote morale from within your organization?
One of the things I found you have to do with all levels of staff is one, give them responsibility, give them ownership of their job, listen to them. You really have to, especially as a senior management position, listen to your staff, because they're out in the community sometimes more than the senior management are, and they're talking to many different types of individuals. So they sometimes get the pulse of the community or get a word of an issue before it comes to a boiling point in the community. So you got to listen to your staff, but you also have to give them opportunities to learn, encourage them to join peer groups, go to conferences, especially if things are local, because you can learn from your counterparts in other communities. And the connections really help. And I'll use a public works connection. We were having an issue in our water department. We had a main break on a Sunday, couldn't get a particular fitting because the 1 yard that we had access to, or supply house, didn't have that in stock, but we were able to call community half hour away because there was a local connection. They had a fitting, let us borrow the fitting. We were able to replace their fitting within 48 hours. But just having those, the knowledge of your coworkers in other communities really can benefit your community. If you're in an emergency situation where you need something or they need something, you've got that connection. But it also really helps morale. One other thing I found that helping morale is, from a senior leadership position, being accessible to your staff at all levels, whether it's secretary, public works laborer, up into your managers. Let them know that I care about what they do. Make sure I go out and thank them for their hard work. Recently, we were doing, again, some street maintenance in public works. We had an ugly incident where a resident just came and yelled up and down at the street crew for really no reason, because they were blocking the work was happening right in front of their driveway, and they couldn't get in their driveway as they wanted to. And as you know, you're doing public works type work, that happens. You're there for 10 minutes and you're trying to get something done, and they took the brunt of it. The next day when I heard about the incident, I made sure I went out and found that crew, thanked them for keeping a level head. They did what they were supposed to. You don't react to that type of stuff. You just tell the customer that, we've got a job to do. We'll work this and we'll get your issue solved as fast as we possibly can. But, and I find that goes a long way to morale when they know the top person in the organization cares.
Thank you. Any follow-up?
I don't know. Have we all had turns already, or what? Because I haven't even gotten a turn yet.
You're about to have one.
Okay. Yeah, I have a follow-up back on the buyouts. What did the city do to all the employees that they wanted to leave that many at one time?
I don't know.
It's kind of scary to see that everybody desert your city.
The decision for the buyout was made before I got there.
Okay.
I will say more than half of them had already signed paperwork that they were going to leave, and a lot of them gave, when they signed the paperwork, there was a 30-day notice period in there.
Well, if you weren't there, that's not important.
So
Okay.
unfortunately, I couldn't. They were looking to cut costs,
Okay.
and we actually reduced personnel by, I think 4 positions were ultimately eliminated in the process.
Okay. Am I up, Mayor?
No, Commissioner Brandon Martin, and then you.
How many questions we've asked already?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, I haven't asked one yet.
You haven't?
No.
Nope,
Okay, it's your turn.
Thought you guys missed me down here.
no.
Describe your approach to ethics in the workplace. In addition, describe a situation where you felt pressure to compromise your integrity and how to dealt with it.
Well, as you're aware, ethics is everything in government, and a lot of government gets a bad rap for ethical issues at different times. For me, my integrity is all I've got. I have to be very strong-willed, be very ethical in everything I do, treat everybody fairly. I can tell you I've been approached on a number of times where developers wanted something, and I've turned down, tickets and freebies and that sort of thing. In fact, I've been in Illinois and watched them establish the whole state ethics ordinance because of people taking bribes, for example. So I try to stay away from all that type of stuff. If I can't go to lunch and with somebody and eat right there or something, I typically don't accept any donations or anything.
Any follow-up to that? Go ahead, Commissioner Brandon Martin.
Well,
What question do you want to ask?
I like what you said before about listening to people.
Yes.
That's empathy.
Mhm.
And that's a trait that is very important for any city manager. I just want to make that comment. In fact, it's listed as one of the top 10, is empathy and understanding what your employees are saying to you.
Yes, and you have to take the
So
time
my
to
question
listen.
to you is this: are you a decisive person?
I can be.
How about if there's complaints about your people under you, and you do your due diligence, and you find out that the complaint is legitimate, in plain English, could you fire a person?
Yes,
I
and
know it's a little bit over what we discussed, but I have to know this. Are you decisive? Are you one that's going to hem and haw and wonder and dance around the street, or can you make a decision and stick to it?
I have, and I've had to fire individuals.
Could you just give me one example? Am I allowed to ask that? Of
Department
when you
heads or
fired
people?
somebody?
When I fired somebody, I fired them for stealing. I fired for dishonesty, where people lied in a certain situation. I always say people fire themselves. They make it pretty easy on the manager. I've also had to discipline others for dealing with the public when you get two sides of the story, and it wasn't what I would call a fireable offense. I needed to use it as a teaching moment to a staff member on how best deal with the public and how to listen, get them to listen to the constituents. I believe in progressive discipline when it comes to that. People need to know that they're not going to be fired for doing their job.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any follow-up for that? Okay. Please describe your leadership and management style.
I always try to be a leader that, like I said, I like to listen. I like to be a team person because it is a team here at any community. The city is not just one person. So I always like to, promote that team environment. And I try to put my leadership style to where I do promote the team environment. I promote my people underneath me. I try to encourage them to take on more responsibility or try new things. Because if you don't try new things or new ideas, you don't move forward in the world today. And some of them could be stuff that was done 50, 60 years ago, could be back to where that's the right answer today or the tried and true answer. But if you don't stretch a little bit and try new things, you don't learn and you don't move your community forward.
So are you progressive?
I would say I'm progressive.
Okay.
I'm one that likes to use technology, understands technology. Although I'm not a big social media person, I do understand social media, but I do see that municipalities typically underuse technology in the workplace, and a lot of times you don't put the investments into the technology that's needed to really get the benefits of the technology. And I'll just use a quick GIS type example. You put your water, sewer, roads, and then you put your condition of those roads in sections into a GIS, and then if you've got projects, you update it, and it becomes a data repository for you, so you can go out and if you're having a certain issue, say a stormwater issue, and you know you've fixed certain things, you've got some ideas where to go, especially if you've had noted problems in your system. And it takes a long time to get used to putting data into that type of system, and it's a cultural change. You have to get that culture to use the technology. And like I said, you have to make investments into that technology to make it useful.
Vice Mayor?
So following up on that question, would you say you're more of a commander or a coach?
Some of both, because you have to be some of both. I do like to coach individuals underneath me. Some are more accepting of a coaching mentality than others. Some of my most successful employees underneath me, I was a coach to them, and they've actually left me for bigger, better communities, or come up into, say, an equal role that I was in a different community. It's a very gratifying to me to see people that are underneath me at various levels take that next step in their career, even if it's not within my organization. They may take that and jump off to another organization and come back to me later. I've had that happen once in my career already.
Any other follow-ups for that? Okay, Vice Mayor.
Tell us about one thing that was the most difficult decision that you made in the past few years. And in describing this example, please give us an idea of the alternatives and the options you analyzed before making a decision.
That was kind of...
Well, I mean, that wasn't that question, but if he could say the same thing.
One of the most difficult decisions I faced is as I took my current position, my first council meeting, I had an engineer report on our sewer treatment plant. And we were actually we got two plants. Our main plant's 100 years old, and he was proposing $45 million worth of improvements in my first council meeting. I go, what did I get myself in for? Because that never had come up in any of my research on the community that they were had those kind of issues. I ran with it, got to know what was driving it. We had two things really driving that. We had EPA issues. If we didn't address them, they were going to be forced on us. The community would watch their neighbors do that. Plus, we had age and condition issues with a 100-year-old sewer treatment plant. It took about 1.5 years of working with the engineers and council, and we made a team decision to move the project forward, which required greatly increasing our sewer rates to the point of about a 70% increase over a 5-year period of time. So, but we chose to control our own destiny versus watching what had happened to our neighbor, where the federal government, due to some overflow issues with the raw sewage into the river, said, you don't have a choice, you will do this, and they had a 200% increase in their rates. So we chose what we thought was best, and we did a number of models. I probably presented to council 10 different financial models on how to pay for the project. They actually chose the model that we implemented, which was 2 years at 20% and 3 years at 10% increases. And then they locked that in, which is what we had to do to guarantee our loans that we're using to pay for the construction. And we're just going to start our first bid here this fall for the first phase of construction, which will be a $13 million project.
Any follow-ups for that? Commissioner Brandon Marty,
No,
it's your question now, and then,
okay. Which number are we on?
well, we haven't done 3, we haven't done 4, we haven't done 7, we haven't done
I
10.
think I'm getting
On
robbed out of my
3,
turn.
Before I went,
You guys, I've only had one question. You guys have had 2 and 3.
go ahead. I'm good, because I didn't want to go right now anyway.
Commissioner Savino.
He's very personable. Go ahead,
I want my turn.
go.
Well, I'm going to take up the time. I'm going to use the number 3 question, which nobody even
Oh,
asked
good.
about.
Yeah, everyone's skipping over that, go ahead.
Are we?
No.
Everybody's been skipping over
I
it. All
said
right.
all of us.
It
This
was
is the,
fine.
I figured I'd go for it since they're cheating me out of my turns, okay?
Okay.
This is a long, you have it in front of you, I'm sure, right? The number 3 question.
I have no
No,
question.
No,
I thought
only
they, I
us.
thought they gave the paper.
That's why you're
sorry.
going to have to remind him
All
of the
right.
bullet
I
point.
may have to ask for a reminder.
Okay, well, I'll go through it.
Okay.
Please describe your experience with the following areas. There's going to be 6 of them, so I'll give you 3 and then I'll give you the other 3. How's that?
Okay.
The first one's economic development and redevelopment, budgeting and financial management, strategic planning and visioning.
Okay.
I'll tell you the other 3, and then we'll go back to them. Capital improvements, coastal management, and affordable housing. You can take them any way you want. I'll check them off as you go.
Okay, well, I'll take the one I've had the least experience with, which
Okay.
is,
Oh, he
well,
has.
thank you, which is coastal management. Obviously, not
Least.
being in a coastal community, I've not had to deal with those issues, but I think earlier I presented a couple where East
Yep.
Peoria and Rock Island are major river communities where I deal with levees and those types of things. I can talk for an hour or more on economic development and redevelopment. I've done a significant amount of economic development and redevelopment in my career. I gave you one example, the baking company that I dealt with. Done a lot of redevelopments in downtown. Rock Island, we had a nonprofit developer that I worked with, for example, that had systematically taken a downtown that it was originally in the 40s and 50s, the retail hub, and then as retailing changed, moved out of the community to a regional mall. The city was left with pretty well a vacant downtown. Over about a 20-year period of time, that changed by a concerted effort of the city, where they were promoting changing the upper floors of the downtown buildings into residence, and then promoting small businesses on the commercial spaces on the ground floor. I did 4 projects with Economic Growth, which is our nonprofit developer. Wrote the development agreements for the city using primarily TIF funds, also some donated property to them that they turned into some donated tax credits. Worked with them on getting other funding sources, mainly housing tax credits for affordable housing that we were putting in the downtown. And over the 20-year period, they had developed a little over 2,000 units in the downtown of Rock Island, which continued for my 5 years we were there. We built 200 units while I was there on my watch, one of which was a new construction build on a site the city had acquired some 10 years earlier as a known redevelopment site. And the reason why it took so long for that site to redevelop is it had some brownfield issues that had some longer-term remediation that had to be done, and it just took almost 10 years to get the remediation completed before we could build residential on it. We could have put other things on it, but they really wanted the residential on that particular component. Budgeting and finance management. Obviously, in my current position, I'm the lead person in budgeting and financing. I work very closely with my finance director. I inherited a tough situation where they had missed their revenue projections on the high side by $1 million. We had $1 million less revenue. So me and the finance director completely redid all the assumptions on our revenue model. We did not want to miss the revenue at all. Actually, we came in just under what actually happened. We were 1% off in the first year, which is an incredible mark from a municipality. Illinois, municipal budgets are highly contingent on retail sales tax, which is sometimes very difficult to predict, especially when you have big swings in the economy. So I've done a significant amount of budgeting, did a lot when I was in Rock Island, played a pretty integral role even when I was in Franklin Park in budget and financial management. I'm also very familiar with the bonding, municipal bonding for capital projects. Been involved in half-dozen bond issues for various capital projects. We're currently using low-interest loans for our sewer treatment plant, so how that's funded. And you have to be very cautious of funding, especially when you're borrowing funds, and you make sure you have your revenue sources to pay for it. Strategic planning and visioning. I really favor a annual type process for strategic planning. Rock Island had a great process where we brought in an outside consultant on an annual basis. Every 5 years they would go through a full-blown strategic plan, goals, objectives, every detail on an annual basis. They updated that, which really helped staff develop the budget and our work priorities. I brought a similar process into East Peoria, brought a consultant in for the first year, started some development, strategic planning with them. They hadn't done any strategic planning in about 8 or 9 years, so it was a longer process. So I really believe that the strategic planning process helps set the long-term vision for your community, and then everything else that you do is implementing that strategic plan. And I've gone so much as to work with my staff members that if we're working on an item that was in the strategic plan and something, say, comes to council, and I'll use your Oasis type projects that you've got going, if we were working on something like that and it was in the strategic plan, it would be noted in the memo that this is for that project. Even though it could be a very minor component of that project, it would be noted for something that's benefiting something in the strategic plan. Did I get all 6 of them?
No.
You left out of affordable housing.
Well, I think I did some on
It-
affordable housing in downtown.
Okay.
Development with,
The capital improvements as well, right?
oh, sorry. Affordable housing, we did a lot of that in Rock Island. Worked very closely not only with our nonprofit doing tax credit deals, but we had a housing authority that I worked with there, promoting affordable housing and providing not only just the housing, but working with the various entities to make sure the folks that live in that housing could better themselves.
You know, I had one question, Mayor. Can I follow up on this real quick?
On affordable housing?
Okay, no, go ahead.
I
Well,
have
it's on the
some
whole,
report.
it's a little bit, but if you have a question on it, go ahead.
Okay. In dealing with affordable housing, how are you, I'm not sure if Peoria is dealing with gentrification or the displacement of certain residents, but how would you or how are you currently dealing with gentrification?
My current community is not dealing with the gentrification. We don't have a significant amount of that. I dealt with it when I was in Rock Island.
Okay.
A lot more, because we were also a CBG community, so I had a direct allotment of community development block grant funds.
Okay,
And
sure.
we used a portion of that for housing and housing-related projects.
Okay.
We worked very closely with the housing authorities. They redeveloped one of their master planned communities. They took down a 60s mid-rise, 100-plus units that had fallen in disrepair, and they had worked very closely with the community to take that site and a neighboring site and replace that with a mixed-income duplex type community. But what it meant is moving all those residents that lived in there into other properties throughout the community, and we worked very closely with them on a plan on how to do that, to be very respectful to the people. Wanted to make sure we kept their kids as much as possible in the same schools, because we had neighborhood grade schools, and it wasn't just myself, it was my staff. It was all the way up through the mayor that was involved in it, and worked very closely with all parties on affordable housing. And it wasn't a dirty word. Some communities, affordable housing is a dirty word.
Just on a fault, I don't know if you've done your research in Dania Beach, we're actually in the process of building a lot more than 100 units. We're gonna get
Yes,
near,
you are.
Okay. And the other thing is that, as you know, and you probably have done your research when you mentioned about, the budgets and so on, and grants and so on. I'm always a large advocate, as the commission knows, and not always going to comment on the rest of it. But how do you feel about knowing that income is coming? How about stretching that out and borrowing the money, or whatever we have to do to get all these things that the city needs that we haven't been able to have in years, that we're behind on, but we know that money is coming? How do you feel? How would you handle something like that?
Well, that goes back to some of the capital planning that I've been involved in. You have to be have a plan to deal with it, and you have to have a funding source. If you know you've got grants and other things coming your way, and you have to know what those grants and stuff will allow, and what the funding sources will allow. Some of those will allow you to go out and borrow funds to complete projects up front, which I have been a part of in doing on a couple of different occasions. Not housing projects, but more infrastructure-related projects where we went out and borrowed money. The biggest one was that underpass project in Franklin Park, where we had a $45 million. The local community share ended up being about $15 million of that $45 million. The rest of it came from federal grants, line item appropriations. We had a lobbyist that we worked with that raised a lot of money for us.
Thank you.
Another follow-up from Vice Mayor.
This goes back to strategic planning and visioning. Did you come in last night?
I did.
Had you ever been to Dania Beach before?
I have been through Dania Beach, but never really stopped for.
Did you take a shuttle, or did you drive a car?
I took a shuttle over.
Okay, what was your impression of what you saw? As far as the visioning portion of that.
Well, no, it wasn't. I came in afternoon yesterday, because I got here and then had lunch in your community, because I asked what local restaurant to go to, because the first thing that I was told to, well, there's a Sub-By and Pop. I was like, no, I want a local place. Send me to a local restaurant, because you can find out a lot about a community by doing stuff. I was impressed with some of the things, some of the development that I saw. You've got a lot of new things coming. You've got a lot of new hotels that are taking advantage of the airport and the cruise trade. In fact, the one I stayed in last night across the street is brand new and very nice. And I saw other opportunities for development. But then I did get out and walk community. I probably walked 6 miles or so yesterday after I got here out into some of your communities. Probably not as far flung as I would have liked to have if I'd had a car to drive, but you have some older communities, some nice neighborhoods that you're going to have to make some decisions on where you want your community to go as far as growth goes. You've got some historic properties. You've got nice artist movement here in town that I can see some of the beginnings of, not knowing much about that. So you've got a lot of opportunities, but you also have to make a choice of what do you want to preserve? What history do you want to preserve here in the community? I was surprised to see the number of antique stores. Some maybe see that as a plus, and some maybe see that as a minus. I really don't have an opinion one way or another on that. But I was pleasantly surprised coming in, especially some of the research that I had done on the population, the income levels and stuff that sits here. You're much more of a regional community. There's a lot of people that pass through the community every day, and you're starting to see developers and retailers and other industries take advantage of the transportation networks that are through your community.
My last follow-up question, because it wasn't on here. As far as your experience with disaster preparedness and planning on the emergency management, what factors and considerations will you use to help guide Dania Beach?
Well, I think disaster preparedness, every community needs to go through that process. My current community, it's led by the fire department, is responsible for the preparedness plans. We've worked on a number of scenarios. About 5 years ago, we had a major tornado hit the edge of our town and then really hit Washington, little community next to us. Unfortunately, a few people died in that event. But when you have a major natural disaster like that, it takes everybody rallying around, and everybody has to know what their jobs are. And being prepared and putting that master plan together really helps people to understand what those jobs are. One of the things that we prepare for is not necessarily always natural disasters, but what happens if we have a tanker overturn in our community, or a rail car rupture in our community, which we have rail lines bringing all kinds of stuff through our community, and I know you have rail lines through here as well. And you have to be prepared for those types of incidents as well, and going through a disaster preparedness process and supporting staff in doing so really helps if something does happen. And I attended those sessions in support.
Do you have any experience in dealing with hurricane or cleanup? As you know, we had Hurricane Irma that was here last, I think, August or September.
Not on that scale of a hurricane cleanup. I've had to clean up after, major rain, windstorms, tornadoes.
Okay.
But it wasn't as wide. Those are typically much more focused.
Okay. Commissioner Brandon Marty?
Yeah, did your area ever have preparedness sessions with all their community people of that local town involved, where they came and you brought in a weather forecaster and preparedness for the way you prepare for a hurricane? You could really use that towards all your major.
Unfortunately, we did not.
Okay.
Hurricanes are much more different than I typically deal with. First of all, you have a lot more time. You typically know that it's coming your direction, where a tornado type natural disaster, sometimes you only have 15 or 20 minutes heads up, and you're looking for safety.
I think she's
No, I'm
speaking of the
talking
season.
What I'm getting at is we do that for hurricane.
Okay.
Because that's our baby,
Big-
right?
mhm.
Do you do that with the community for tornadoes and stuff like that? That's what I want to know.
We don't do a big public outreach preparedness drills
Okay.
for the community. More of that's handled at the school level. I know the schools do some of that with teaching the kids what to do for those types of events, but we do not, unfortunately, get out
With community
with the
involvement.
community involvement.
Okay, thank you.
My next question is, how comfortable are you with making an unpopular decision that you feel is in the best interest of the city?
Well, I gave one example where I had to raise sewer rates drastically. And
Well, that's fine. You can use
you,
that. As
but yeah, I am comfortable making those types of decisions. I find you just have to have all your facts and reasons why, and have to know once a decision like that has been made that it's a joint decision. It's not all on one shoulders. I find
Sure.
that, you know, sometimes some of those decisions people around you start questioning the decision, and that's when I've found that things don't go as well, when somebody questions that was part of the decision-making process. And I had that happen to me earlier in my career, where everything was supported, and then at the 11th hour, somebody started wavering.
Sure. Vice Mayor?
Describe what you would see as your ideal relationship between the city commission and the city manager. Where we have it here is that if I want to send an email to the Director of Community Development or Public Services, I have to copy the city manager on everything. Would you be of that mindset where you have to know from us as elected officials that every question that we ask somebody you have to be involved in, or would you trust your department heads to make the decisions? And what's your relationship with the city commission?
And see, I can see both sides of that, to be known. If it's routine, what I call routine business, you're reporting a pothole needs to be filled to Public Works. I don't necessarily need to know that, because any citizen, but if it's got something that more to it than that, I prefer to be notified, as copied on the communication. I know there's going to be communication, and you're going to be out in the community and run into the directors. I know that, and I'm comfortable with that, but I like on emails where it's easy to copy the city manager. I feel that it gives me an idea that I know how much communication, or at least I know that the communication went on. Sometimes you don't realize how much communication can go on between yourself and a department head, and it's not meant to go around the city manager in any way, but then sometimes it could be taken that way. All depends on how the department head keeps the manager informed. And I like to work where, you know, I'm pretty open. I like to give my department heads a lot of discretion, but I need to be informed. And I think that's one of the rules that is nice from my perspective as a city manager, to be known that, yeah, just copy me on the email. That way I know that something transpired.
Commissioner Brandon Marty?
Yes. Do you agree that it's best for your department managers to at least inform you as our city manager that they've had a conversation with the commissioner, rather than you be surprised?
Yes.
Thank you. That's it.
My follow-up to that is, do you all have a CRA?
We do not have a CRA.
Okay.
I am somewhat familiar with it. Different states do economic development and stuff differently.
So how would your relationship how would you directly communicate with the CRA, and what type of function would you all have in working together, or do you view them as just a totally separate department?
I see they're part of the city, and I would feel, because of their mission and their charge, being economic development, redevelopment, promoting the city, that's part of the city's mission. They need to be an integral part of the city manager's role here in promoting the city, especially with my background in economic development. I could provide a lot of guidance, maybe a different perspective on economic development, redevelopment, because I've seen different parts of the country, especially if you've got somebody that's most of their career is local. Just throw different ideas at them, not necessarily right or wrong, but help guide them. And I feel like I'd be able to work closely with those
Okay.
types of individuals.
Thank you. Commissioner Savino?
My turn?
Yes.
By the end of your first 90 days of your first year, what would you expect to have accomplished as the new city manager?
the first 90 days is really a critical time frame. And I don't know if you can accomplish a lot publicly with new ideas, but I think the first 90 days, I'd want to get to know council. I'd want to get to know the city staff. Spend a lot of time, like I said earlier, listening to them, getting acclimated out into some of the community groups, and spend a lot of time getting to know the community. And then getting a handle on what are the big issues for Dania Beach. What are the 3 to 5 things that I need to tackle in my first year, and try to start putting, the basis of some sort of plan to tackle those big issues in that first year. But it's really getting to know the community in the first 90 days.
Do you know what you will be facing here in the first 90 days, our biggest thing?
No, and that's one of my questions for you. What's the biggest thing?
It will be our budget, just
Because your budget year starts December 1st?
October.
October 1st, okay.
So that's something that we'll be working on.
I'm used to a May 1 budget.
Okay. Commissioner Brandon Marty?
I would assume they're already starting on some of the budget prep. for
Yeah,
next
that's
year.
why I'm asking you, are you familiar? Because you're not going to have 3 months just to sit and chat with the commission.
No,
Definitely not.
no, and I did that in East Peoria. I only had a few months before we had to jump right into the
You'll
budget.
probably have a week with all the stuff we have going on. Listen, we have a tremendous amount of development going on, a lot of things that are in limbo, a lot of projects that constantly come towards us. We are right now at mid-year budget, and so these are things that you're going to have to hit the ground running in.
Yeah, you got to spend a lot of time on the budget issues and working with staff to understand what's going into the budget. And like I said, what's the council goals? How does the developments fit in with the council goals?
Okay. Commissioner Brandon Marty?
Yes, right. Do you agree that by the end of the first 90 days, what you would expect to have accomplished as a city manager before what you said is also important that trust be included in that?
Yes, and that's all about getting out and to know you and know the community and start to build that trust relationship
Thank
between myself, and a lot of it's a continuation of the trust that's already been built with city council and the city already.
Thank you.
We
got
have
3
time probably
We got
for.
3 questions left, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying,
So
so.
we shorten the responses, we get them all done.
Okay, I want to know why you're interested in this position, and is there anything you would like to add or clarify, and also your salary range that you would be expecting?
Why I'm interested in this position, I'm in a,
It's cold there.
it's cold there.
That's good. I like the straightforward answer.
But no, I think I need to move on for a number of reasons. I'm in a true commission form of government for each elected officials over a department. And
Wow.
so they have the firing and hiring authority. I don't as the manager. And it's very difficult to manage in that type of environment. There were some things that they were supposed to change and they didn't. There's a whole history of report that's publicly available before I got there, and they were supposed to address some of those issues, and they haven't been addressed, so I need to move on. And why here? This is something I've talked with my family, looking to broaden my search, looking to come this way. I do have relatives here in Florida, not necessarily in this metro area, but not all that far from here, so it would be nice to be closer to them, although I am a Midwest guy, so this would be a bit of a change. I don't know if I'd miss the winters. Snow plowing is no fun, those types of things. Salary, I would expect the salary to be, in the 150s to 175, maybe somewhere in that range.
Okay. Any other question that we didn't
No,
hit on? I know we.
2 more questions to ask if you want to ask them.
Okay, you want me to ask them, or?
You go ahead and ask them.
Okay. This is number 4. What would we learn from you if we contacted a cross-section of citizens from your current or most recent community, including supporters, detractors, and community organizations?
Well, you'll probably learn, especially if you I've not been there that long, so I don't have a long history in my current community, that I have tried to get out and be part of the community, that I am not afraid to be the face of the community. Oftentimes the media will come to me, interview me, and I've been used to doing that. Did a lot of that in Rock Island as well. As the community development director, any development stuff, typically the city manager would defer it to me, the mayor. Oftentimes we did stuff together. The manager liked to stand off the camera. So I'm used to dealing with the media. I'm honest. If I tell you I'm going to do something, I try my best that I'm going to get it done within the timeline that I may have indicated. And I try to communicate when I've accomplished a task, because sometimes I'm asked to do something and I may not have to get back to the person to accomplish that. But if at all possible, I try to let them know that I got the task accomplished.
Okay, and the last question is number 8, you all. With the continuing fiscal constraints, how would you recommend the city commission, city manager, and staff deal with a decreased demand for services? Increase, sorry.
So there's always an increase
Yeah.
for services, right?
Sorry, yeah.
I think you have to, again, getting back to the answer I said earlier, you have to look to new ways of providing the services, and can you do it, provide a better service if you institute new technologies. If you hired certain people to refill jobs that may have been eliminated in the past. You have to look at all those options. And you may have to make, as a council and staff, we may have to recommend some very hard choices on which direction to go, which priorities to fulfill, and which stuff we can tackle directly and which stuff we have to tackle maybe indirectly.
Okay, sorry, I forgot Ms. Grace's question. Are you willing to relocate to live in Dania Beach?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
And if you look, every time I've made a major move, I've moved to the community I've moved in.
Wow.
And I'll bring it up now because moving the distance and, from Illinois down here, this is something I've talked with my family about. And so my family is supporting my job search down here.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone? Any more questions from anyone?
No, thank you.
We thank you so much for taking the time out to come all the way from East Peoria to Little Dania Beach.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
Oh, I just want to put in a little dig for my father. My father built the rapid transit down the Dan Ryan Expressway.
Okay.
Bloop. Thank
That's
you.
not a little project.
Very big project.
Very big project.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, it's not. We have one more for lunch break. Oh, it's Brad? I didn't know who was next, but. Did you play basketball or something, all that height? That's all. Dang, I wish I had your height. I played basketball in college. I played for the University of Miami. So actually, my
oldest son's 7.
so some guys that I met playing basketball in Israel, his name is Brian Randall.
Okay.
They live in Champaign-Urbana.
No.
Well, they played for Illinois, but
Yeah, he lived in Rock Island.
her family, his wife's family, who I'm really close with, they live in Champaign now.
They live in Champaign now.
Yeah,
He grew up in Rock Island.
correct. Okay, small world, Brian Randall.
He's got a sister there as well.
Okay. Well, he's adopted, so I don't know if it's